Good. So we're going to open it up now. And the approach that we use in these sessions is we hear 3 or 4 questions, and then each of the panelists comment on them, and then we'll do another round. And I should mention, again, as I did earlier, that Dr. Galea needs to leave exactly at 10 to get to his department's graduation.
My students will be very mad at me if I don't, if I'm not there on time. I have to be up at 168 at 10:30. I apologize.
So, questions?
May we ask questions up here as well?
Sure. And we'll maybe come for the second round, we'll come upstairs and bring a microphone up.
Hi, I just have a quick clarification question for our first speaker. And this is, I feel like this might come off as a bit silly, but for one of the first slides, it was saying that if we were to reduce salt by about 3 grams, that it would make a difference. But I just wanted to double check on that, because if the daily intake kind of peaked at 3.5, that would be reducing it significantly, but maybe I wasn't looking at the slides right. I just wanted to double check on that in the spirit of questioning studies and stuff.
Yeah, I'm sorry that was confusing. Some people talk about grams of salt, sodium chloride, and some people talk about milligrams of sodium, and they forget the chloride part. And so that 3 grams was about salt, and a 3 gram salt reduction, it would end up being about, someone help me out, about 1,300 milligrams of sodium reduction.
Thanks. So now we'll hear 3 or 4 questions, and then the panelists will comment.
So I have a kind of reflexive skepticism about big data and the use of enormous quantitative analyses to show things that we already know. Any of us who's ever published anything knows that people selectively cite things and selectively don't cite things. And, you know, I wasn't sure what was new about this. And I thought the Cochrane collaboration was intentionally created to introduce qualitative analyses over and above just the counting approach. And I want to ask both speakers, it seems that the Cochrane authors, who were also the BMJ authors, were introducing this whole new notion about lipids. And the BMJ is no fool, and I was surprised then that seems like a sort of weird outlier idea. Is this a weird outlier idea? And should we not be considering the Cochrane as analyzing qualitatively in a superior way?
And let's get a few more questions, and then I'll give both panelists a chance to respond.
About the evidence, if you were to implement some sort of policy reducing salt across the population. So this is a basic biological question. Does sodium lead to hypertension in the normotensive? Let's say you're not eating a lot of sodium and then you start eating a lot of sodium. All things being equal, does that cause hypertension? I know it's like a loaded biological question, but that's what my question is.
Good. 2 more, and then we'll turn back to the panelists.
Good morning. Considering the kind of siloed nature of this discussion, I'm wondering if it's worth talking about the possible beneficial spillover effects of the interventions that I'm guessing we would pursue if we decide that reducing sodium intake is beneficial. For example, if 80% of the American diet's sodium comes from processed food, if reducing processed food consumption doesn't have enough beneficial spillover effects to make it, on things like obesity and diabetes rates, that it's kind of a moot point if it's if the scientific evidence is strong enough specifically for sodium.
And one more, over in the corner there.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. My question is the mechanism of sodium-potassium pump channels in the mechanism of hypotension. I'm wondering whether it is worth to recommend potassium level at the same time when we recommend sodium level.
Right. So, do you want to start? And
Let me start and try to pick up a couple of them quickly. So we know that increasing sodium consumption increases blood pressure. And you asked that it increase hypertension. Hypertension is taking a distribution of blood pressure and trying to dichotomize it, making it a binary thing, which it isn't. Blood pressure is a continuous variable, and it's arbitrary that we've drawn a line there at 140. But it does increase the proportion of people who would be above that line, and I don't think there's any question about that. It is also true that if you increase your potassium consumption, that you tend to lower blood pressure, and that's something that we should be recommending as well. And it's, in general, when you take unprocessed food and you go to processed food, you're taking out a lot of potassium and you're adding an awful lot of sodium, which gets to your question, which is that, yes, we should recommend that people be consuming less processed food. That's going to have health benefits across the board, including sodium reduction. But I also think that we should be reducing sodium consumption, sodium levels in processed food, because no matter how much we recommend people have a diet of fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains, that an awful lot of people are going to eat processed food anyway.
I have two threads to the answers. Number one is there has never been a randomized control trial of the efficacy of using parachutes when jumping out of airplanes. We think they work and we use them. So I'm saying that because I actually want to be clear that I don't necessarily think that these notions of absolute gold standards of evidence that one needs to act are in some respects absurd extremity. I think the points about Cochrane Review are well taken. I do agree with your assessment that they are ultimately bringing a level of qualitative as well as quantitative sophistication to reviews. I think it's indisputable that they are held in high regard. Whether that regard is earned or not is another issue, but I think they are broadly in the community held in high regard. It strikes me as we're having this discussion that this is exactly the kind of discussion that should be had. It strikes me that this ultimately is hinging on balancing evidence, the state of the evidence, the solidity of the evidence, the confidence in the evidence, the various biases that are informing our evidence. And it is a discussion that engages public health practice and the public health science that is paid to actually just do the science in a meaningful, thoughtful way. And I don't know what the right answer here is, but I certainly feels to me like having this kind of discussion around these kind of issues is exactly the kind of discussion we should be having. In truth, we seldom, next to never, have this kind of discussion. There are consensus committees that get on with their work largely behind closed doors, and this kind of discussion about an issue that's controversial we don't have. I think in part it comes out of a sense of insecurity in public health. I think we're worried that if we have this kind of discussion, it somehow devalues our message, and maybe politically that's true. I will not comment on that. Dr. Farley is much more sophisticated in thinking about politics than I am. But I suppose I would like to encourage us all, and I say this for myself as much for all of us here, that when we have issues of where there are grounds for discussion, we should open ourselves up to discussing them. And I think not only could it help us figure out what the right way is, it could also help us figure out if we do act, which way the action is better taken to be more efficacious.